So I have to say, I have a love-hate relationship with this book. And I've told Julian this. I mean, it is the juxtaposition of adrenaline rush and gut punches throughout the entire thing. And I think one of the major statements that stands out to me is everywhere she turned, she felt as if society were telling her she needed to be less of a success at work and to be more of a success at home. So in thinking about this book, can women really have it all?
It's one of the themes of the book, and it's great to be here, by the way. Thank you for hosting us. Love doing Google Talks. Thank you for your interview questions. It is a big issue for women, whether you are here at Google or whether you are, across the globe, and that is the unequal pay, unequal work at home, the unpaid work at home. I believe in a quote by Ruth Bader Ginsburg who says, "You can't have it all at once." So that's what I would say, is that you can have it all at different times or parts of that, but it's a myth to say that you can have it all at once.
And Sonja, I would love to hear your take on it.
It's funny because I went through in the book, I went through a process where I had a child and breast cancer at the same time. And I really had to think, what was I doing, right? And I wanted to have a family and also wanted to have a career. And I did some soul searching and I said, well, what is it that defines who I am? And I came up with one little sentence, and it was basically investing in people and companies that matter, right? I didn't ever want to quit the venture industry because I think it's important for women especially, and even men too, is to always have a foot in somewhere, right? Never just leave your job and just do, I'm quitting, I'm just going to stay at home. I mean, you can do that, but have a foothold in something that keeps you relevant, that keeps you interesting. And so one of the things I did is I founded Broadway Angels, which is a group of women, all women, and we're all alpha girls, and you have to have measurable success to be a Broadway Angel. And what we do is we share deals and due diligence. So it's half venture capitalists and half founding entrepreneurs. And many of them, are retired from their big job, but they are staying relevant by being a Broadway Angel and seeing, what new technologies are happening or new things happening in consumers, with consumers. And so they maintain their relevancy, which keeps them relevant, which keeps them engaged, but they're also spending time with families and doing other things. And so I think women can have it all, but you have to really ask yourself, what does all mean to you, right? You can't have all, like society says, a full-time job and, being a perfect, housewife or whatever. But what does all mean to you? And I think if you can get to that answer, you can have it all. And that's how I've been living my life my whole life.
Another quote that I really liked from the book said, "The best revolutionaries are not the people who hate the dictators, but those who empathize with the victims." And I do want to point out, Julian, you did such a great job focusing on statements like, men use philanthropy to advance themselves, but women use philanthropy to care for others. Or, and it's not about your network, or just your network, it's about building relationships. And so when we think about being a revolutionary in that regard, I'd love to know from either of you, or both of you actually, what advice would you give to women who want to do something revolutionary in their careers or in their lives?
Well, it was very interesting to me to do this book, which is focused on women. There are great men in the book, and then there are men who didn't behave as well, but this is very much focused on women. And my prior books had focused on kind of these hard-charging men. And so I really noticed differences in how women succeed and become revolutionaries. And it's actually maybe will sound counterintuitive, but I think that there is something that I have kind of connected with, and it's a term called tempered radicals. And it's about how we can make incremental change that adds up to something really significant, i.e. revolutionary, where women often will, again, succeed. It's one small success at a time. And sometimes it means, playing, in the case of the story that I wrote, it's about playing by the rules that were defined by others in many cases. And those rules were very much defined by men. I write about this world of venture capital where 94% of all check writing VCs were men. The figure is similar today, a little bit improved. But to be a revolutionary, you have to learn you learn how to play the game, and at the same time you're advancing yourself and your career by doing all sorts of things that these women of the book did very successfully. You can also, I've learned, advance the causes that are important to you. And I think that is revolutionary. So I think we should look at revolutionaries or radicals not just as those who are the Rosa Parks, who with one defiant act will spark a movement, the civil rights movement, refusing to give up her seat on the bus. I think all of us can be revolutionaries with kind of incremental victories that add up to something really significant. And that's a big part of the story of this book. And Sonja's success and many of the other women who, again, played by the rules, achieved huge success, and did so with these small victories along the way. And now they can trailblaze. Now they can lift, they're lifting other women up. So I think it's a very accessible sort of way of thinking about being a revolutionary.
So I think that quote is attributed to me.
Well, there was method to my madness.
Yeah. I literally lived through the hardest 8 months of my life, which is in the book, which is shocking that I even told Julian about it. But having a baby and having breast cancer at the same time is a really tough time, right? And I could have whined a lot about how hard it was for me at that time. But what it really did was it opened my eyes to how hard it is to be a woman at work with a family. And how few women there were that were working full-time jobs. There just weren't even a lot of examples of what do you do when your partner has, as a new child and breast cancer. And there just really weren't a lot of examples. So instead of complaining, which I'm not a complainer, and it's sincere, Julian, I always view obstacles as my allies. So instead of complaining and blaming somebody, which is so easy to do all the time, I decided I was going to change things. And I was going to bring awareness to the women in venture capital. And now we have Broadway Angels. But I was also going to help other women and girls to believe in themselves so that they can do something. And so that's why I started Project Glimmer. And it was all because I felt really awful for an 8-month period. And I was just determined not to let that experience defined me, and I realized I couldn't even keep those feelings if I wanted to, even today, because nothing stays permanent, and change the world. And I have changed just a little bit. I don't have to change the entire world. And I think a lot of people think when they want to do something revolutionary, they have to change everything. You don't have to boil the ocean. You can do one thing at a time. And with Project Glimmer, we started out giving 800 gifts during the holidays to the San Francisco firefighters toy program. And since that time, we've now served, I think, over 1 million people, women and girls. We have in-person mentorship programs. We do all this incredible stuff. But at the time when I started, I didn't plan to start a nonprofit that was going to change the lives of many, many, many women and girls. And so I would just encourage everyone in the room, if you see a problem, stop complaining about it and start doing something. And that's how we'll solve it.
Let's follow up just a little bit on that. So we're talking about playing the game. Mm-hmm. When, I believe it's Teresa, is getting a divorce and has done incredible work lifting up fellow male partners as well as, other colleagues, she's forced to tell all of her clients in her book that she's getting a divorce. I mean, some of the most humiliating things. I mean, you babysat when you first got started. I know we've all done these things at some point, I've gone and gotten, someone's dry cleaning and someone's lunch. Even here at Google a few years ago, I was still doing some of those types of things. Have we changed the game even incrementally?
Well, it's interesting. All jobs have challenges, every single one. And again, it's back to the complaining thing, right? And you have to look at your job in a strategic way? Like, how do you win, right? And you can, of course, complain about all kinds of things, or you could win, right? And so I talk about dressing for work, right? And I think women have a higher standard about what kind of clothes they should wear because they're immediately judged by their appearances. And it's the most controversial comment I have. I say, wear Banana Republic, but think like Coco Chanel. Like, that's how women should dress for work. And
that falls on deaf ears here at Google. You
yeah,
know that,
I know.
right?
Well, Google's different. I mean, you guys are so cool. You can wear whatever you want. But, but for venture capitalists, women in finance, et cetera, you're with so few women, you have to change the way you dress. And it's a very controversial comment because a lot of people are saying, well, I'm not going to give up who I am by wearing, your formula for success because I am the kind of person I like to wear halter tops or whatever. But it's not about giving up who you are. It's about winning the game. It is a tactic to your strategy for winning. And so if you can change your tactics, that's not giving up who you are. But if that's the way the rules are, and that's how you win, you want to do that. And then once you do win, you can change the rules, right? But you can't change the rules from the bottom. And so I think things have changed remarkably for women. I think the Me Too movement really helped because all of a sudden, what was in darkness became light, and we're seeing it over and over and over and over and over again in every single industry. And I think behavior is just getting better, and women are also not the only one anymore. So if there's an issue, you can bring it up and it is addressed. And that never happened before the Me Too movement ever. And so I think it really has gotten better. And I think men are also so aware and so part of this movement. So I think it really has changed dramatically.
And not to have fallen into that pattern of, hey, I was just focusing on women-based questions as I prepared for this. I want to tap into that a little bit. How can women and leaders like yourselves who are influencers and voices here, how can we bring men into the conversations that we want to have? I mean, you said something to the effect, I think, Julian, in the book that, gender inequality is every gender's responsibility and problem. It's not just one gender's problem. So, how can men shine a light on their female counterparts and how can we equip them with the types of things we need to hear? Or how do we start that conversation for them?
Well, I think, one of the things that I'm really proud of with the book is that there are these great guys in the book, these great men in the book who were fantastic allies to the women when the women were the only, they were the onlys. They were the sole woman at the table. And, they had these male, either mentors, or they had a guiding force, or they had the guy around them, in Teresa Gao's case, who would tell them the locker room talk, what the guys in the Valley were saying when they were landing deals. So they're a great...
Which, by the way, was, just to be clear with the audience who hasn't read, that was not great feedback of an emotional stance, but it let her know where she stood in the Valley, correct?
Right. So Teresa Gao, I tell these stories of these women coming to Silicon Valley and their backstories and their family stories, and in Teresa's case, coming from Jakarta, Indonesia. And it was a long journey, actually, for all of these women, and a really, really powerful one, big dreams. But Teresa then became a venture capitalist, and she's at a firm with all men, and she's chasing down these big, big deals and landing them. She had specialized in cybersecurity, which is another great message for women, to specialize in something, make yourself invaluable, and be more quantitative, which is always a good thing, and that's what Teresa did. But she chased down one big cybersecurity deal called Web Cohort, which would become Imperva, and found out that the guys in the Valley were talking about, kind of undermining her accomplishments with her talk by making suggestions that she didn't get the deal through her talents as a VC. So, stuff that could have derailed her, could have really upset her. And it was her male ally who told her this. And, she just let it go, but was glad she knew and was more determined than ever to continue to succeed. So there are great male allies in the book, and ones who really were very instrumental. And I think the women were very savvy as well about who they develop these kind of professional partnerships with. I think for the men out there, I think there are all sorts of ways that you can really be a great ally. You know, one of the things just to realize is women's stories don't get told nearly enough. I mean, whether it's in history or whether it is, across media today. And, even when you see stories about women economists versus men, even the head size is smaller for women, studies have shown. So tell women's stories when you're tweeting, when you're on social media. If you can raise up a woman around you, we all can do something. We all can, however incremental, going back to how to be a radical or a revolutionary, we all can do something. Men can, again, tell the stories of the women around. Tell your stories. Tell the stories of the amazing women around you, whether your colleagues, your friends, your relatives, just to get their faces and their names and more gender balance. So that's one really significant way I think that men can be allies. There are all sorts of things in meetings where if the woman is the lead, say on a deal or on a project, but yet all the questions keep going to the man at the table, for a man to step in and say, I think, Sonja is really the expert here. Let's direct the questions to her. They shouldn't be coming to us. So men can be very proactive in that way. And those are just two suggestions that I would have. Tell their stories, raise them up, and think about, and I think this book really helps in terms of seeing the world from women's eyes and viewpoint. What is it like to be the only or one of the only women at the table? What does it look like from their perspective? So I think it's a very powerful book, actually, for men as well, I hope.
So I think what men can do is think about hiring. We all have our decoder rings on what makes a great candidate for a job. And typically, it's usually someone who looks just like us, right? And, I think that's why the venture industry is so male-dominated and white, is because there's just all white men in the industry. But if you think about a new position, make sure at least half the candidates for the position are diverse. And there was a venture capitalist who is famously quoted as saying that his venture firm didn't want to lower their standards to hire a woman. And that didn't go well for him. Not at all, actually. But the thing is that the standards change, right? So what makes a venture capital great? Maybe a man has to have a CEO experience and has to have taken a company public or something like that and have an engineering degree. Maybe that's one criteria, but I actually don't fit the mold of what would make a great venture capitalist because I don't have an engineering degree. I don't have very much operating experience, very little actually, but I was Investor of the Year, 6 out of 17 years. And it's because I have different skills. It's because I understand large markets. I understand business models. I do other things and I win the deals, which is key to being a great venture capitalist. And so with the criteria for any job, I think you should maybe alter it a little bit because for one reason, there are very few women CEOs who have taken a company public in the world. I think Julie Wainwright just went public for The Real, and of the thousands of companies that went public on the NASDAQ, I think only 20 of them had women CEOs. And so if that's your criteria for venture capital, the pool is much smaller. So that needs to change. And so I think hiring is really key and changing the hiring criteria.
And if I may add one thing, you had asked about whether we've made progress. And Sonja is very optimistic, and that is truly how she is, which is wonderful. But, as I got into this project, I began to see how pervasive these inequities really are and how they continue today. And I got into this very much as a journalist. And I walked out still as a journalist, but very much feeling like an activist because you look at the numbers and you look at the underrepresentation across industries. Between only 5 and 20% of the top management ranks really across industries are held by women. So I see this as a really critical point in in time, a critical moment, kind of a call to action to affect change. And yes, there are these pockets of great promise. What you see Sonja doing, what you see Teresa Gao, and some women really across the country who are spearheading this to affect change, to bring more extraordinary women into these positions of power. But there are also these numbers which are pretty dire, pretty abysmal.
But I do want to give a plug to my partners. My partners were pretty great. They did take a chance on me, and they hired me at a very young age, without the proper criteria. And even when I was going through the hard times, they kept my job, and they paid 100% of my salary and health insurance. So those things were amazing. And so I want to make sure that I give them a plug for that.
For sure. And perhaps, and it's worth, I remember thinking this, I'm like, well, would they have called, because I did call out, okay, they didn't call Sonja during her battle with cancer when she was away from the office. Would they have done that for a male colleague? Probably not. So they, if nothing else, they treated you as they would have treated their male colleagues. And isn't that what we're really asking for, at least to start with? Right. Yeah. I want to drill down a little bit more into the venture capitalist entrepreneur relationship, because I think there are a lot of folks in this room who have great ideas. We're different ages. We're wondering, what makes a great idea? What do you look for? I know you look for passions and things that are relevant to you. I know sometimes when you would get a pitch in the room at Menlo, if no one else knew what it was about or how it related at all, they're like, Sonja, what do you think? So what do you look for?
Well, first thing I look for is a large market, because if you don't have a market, your company will always lose. You don't have to have the best CEO or the best founder, or even your technology doesn't always have to work perfectly in the beginning, because those things you can fix, but you can't fix a market. So I lead with market all the time. Also, I think the entrepreneur has to have some specialized knowledge about the problems that those markets have, some kind of unique insight that they have that other people may not, that will provide a great foundation for what kind of company they want to start. And then, you have to have the ability to build a great team, like an idea that's strong enough that you could hire really great people. And as we all know, how hard it is to hire people. And then finally, you have to have a great business model. And it's kind of funny with the rise of consumers, that kind of has gone out the door. And someone says, what's your hobby? My hobby is business models. I love business models. Even Project Glimmer has a great business model. Like, we give away 90% gross margin things that are last season, right? It's not like we're giving away milk, right? And so you want to have a really great business model. And so those are the things that you do, and just really have a passion. So I was at Harvard Business School a couple of years ago, and they have the Idea Lab there. And there was an ad that people post, it's kind of ironic, it was paper, but on the bulletin board, it said, engineer looking for a great idea. That's the worst way to start. The worst, like absolute worst. It's got to be the great idea looking for, engineers, because you can't just, you have to have the passion for starting a business that's really in your heart, because starting a business is really hard. And if you don't wake up every morning excited about what problem you're solving, you're probably not going to get out of bed. So you need to be very, very passionate, because it's really, really hard being an entrepreneur.
I want to talk a little bit more too, because I believe it's in your story where, as the venture capitalist who convinces her partners or convinces partners, we're gonna invest in this, we're getting the funding, whatever round of funding it is, you actually work with that entrepreneur founder. Mm-hmm. And you asked him at the end of the conversation, when he was pitching or doing a conversation, it's like, how do you feel?
Right. So that's the famous story, and it's so surprising that's probably brought up the most when my story in Alpha Girls. It's basically, I'm on the board of Acme Packet, which was a company that went public and was sold to Oracle for billions of dollars after they went public. And
billions of dollars.
Yeah, billions of dollars, right? And Andy Ori, I've backed him 3 times now. I'm on his board for 128 Technologies as well. And he's just the one who told the story, but any one of my CEOs could have told the story, where after the board meeting, you present the plan, and did you meet the plan? And of course, companies never meet the plan, ever, 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 especially if they're private. So like missing the plan is really not always an indicator if the company's doing well or not. And they present the sales and whatever the other things that they present in board meetings are. And then you go home and that's supposedly the end of the board meeting until the next one. But I like to call the entrepreneurs the next day and I ask them how they're feeling. Because if they feel they have been beat up in the board meeting, they're going to tell me. They're going to be like, well, it was really rough last night. I was like barely asleep because, I was so worried. If they're like, oh no, I feel better than ever because I know that pipeline is so strong and, we're going to do great. So then I really find out how the company is doing. You really don't find out how the company is doing during the board meeting. You find out the day after. And I'm almost afraid that now everybody else knows my secret, right? It was my competitive advantage. Now the world knows. But if you ask someone how they're feeling the next day, they're going to tell you. And you're going to get some real insights in how business is doing. Because business is not just about the numbers. It's about so many other things that are non-measured.
But I think just to your point, and it was a throwaway, I've backed him 3 times now. I mean, it's about building that relationship. It's about trust. It's not just about who you know and the numbers.
Right. So with the Perkins Fund, 1/3 of the entrepreneurs that I have backed, are prior entrepreneurs that I've backed before. So I actually view that as my report card. And I think when you're talking to venture capitalists, you should ask them that number. How many entrepreneurs do you have that you've backed in the past? Because a lot of VCs have 0, right? And you really want someone that's on your team. And, I don't look at it as an us versus them. I look at it as a we, because we are going to do this together. And I provide the capital and they provide the hard work, sweat, and tears. I mean, I provide not very much compared to what entrepreneurs provide. But if we are having a problem, we're going to work on it together. And if you start pointing fingers and blaming, you might as well just write the whole company off. So it's a we thing. It's not an us versus them thing. And I think that's very unique to women, right? Very unique.
I totally agree. And I want to talk a little bit now about that pipeline for up-and-coming venture capitalists and entrepreneurs. We obviously don't have enough women in that realm, and even Melinda Gates says we've got to get them into technology before we can get them to the table, and as an entrepreneur, then on the venture capitalist side as well. How do we do that? I think part of that inspiration is you are working together. That's more of this younger generation of being collaborative and leaning on each other, and also women of color, just that diversity level.
Well, I always say you can't be what you can't see, which is why I'm so grateful for Julian for writing this book, because her question was, where are the women, when she was researching what topic she was going to write her next book on? And there really were no women in the press. There's no women. People didn't think there were any women. And of the few women that were in the industry, were like, we're here. And hopefully the reason why I was so open to talking to Julian about this book, and it's very private. This is my private life that the whole world's reading about, right? But the reason why I was so open to doing that is because I wanted to inspire women and girls to get into technology and to become venture capitalists, because the world needs more women in venture. I mean, there are so many examples of technologies that have been funded that are not good for society, and women don't do that. I mean, I invest in people and companies that matter in general, and I would never invest in a game company designed to addict children. Like, why would you do that, right? And so that's why I'm very, very, very strong about this point, is that we just need to have venture capitalists that are investing not only for financial gain, but for societal gain. And that just needs to be out there, especially with global warming, with all kinds of issues that our society is facing. And we know now that tech and venture capital is the beginning of foundations of society. And that needs to change.
Julian, I know your perspective is slightly different, but you are from a journalistic background. You've come from the heart of Silicon Valley. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how would you inspire young women, or really any age, whether we're mid-career, what have you, to go into this, inspiration for venture capitalism and entrepreneurship.
Well, I think the stories in the book are inspiration. Even though the women were broad-sided at times, they love this industry. They love tech. They love venture capital. They love entrepreneurs who are eternal optimists. They have to be or they wouldn't do it. Extremely hard workers. So I think the story shows that women are great at this. Women love it. And maybe those two, it's the chicken or egg question. Women are good at it because they love it. Despite the challenges, they are still in it. I think that one big thing, and this is an interesting subject that came up in the book, is money and women and the issue of money, which is also fraught for women. It's much more complicated for women than it is for men. So I think that's a really interesting, important point to discuss, that it's great for women, especially at a younger age, to make, well, at any age, to make a lot of money, because with money is power, and we need to get more money into the hands of more women. So I think that that's actually a really positive thing and a game changer, potentially, because of the influence that it wields. So I would say, I hope that the stories of the book, as they're adapted also for the screen, that inspires people and makes you think, oh, well, look at Sonja Perkins. She, helped, her investments really made the internet safer and faster. Look at Teresa Gao, the deals that she landed. Magdalena Yeşil came from Istanbul, Turkey with nothing, with $43, became an electrical engineer, helped build a little company called Salesforce.com. MJ Elmore drove west in her old Ford Pinto and lands a job at a company called Intel and goes on to become one of the first women in history to make partner at a venture capital firm. All of these women are in the game today. And so I think they are these phenomenal stories and role models, and, with the failures and the successes. This is not just, an upward trajectory all the way. So I hope it's that. And then I hope also just, this issue around money should be one that should not be as complicated for women as it is.
It's okay to admit we enjoy it.
Yes, exactly.
We don't even do that. And that falls into one of my favorite statements from the book that also still makes me hyperventilate, which is you don't have to obey the rules. I'd love to open it up for questions in the audience. Do we have some? If there's anyone. Well, I'm going to keep asking some questions, but the first person who is inspired, either raise your hand and I'll toss out the cube, or feel free to walk up. I'd love to know, Julian, where do you think the next industry or area for women and disruption is? Where do you think we need to look next?
Well, I actually think it's across industries, as I said, where I think it's, I recently spoke to a group of women architects, women builders, where they're trying to bring in more women and kind of rally the troops of women who are there. I think that disruption, one area or one actually way to disrupt is to form women's networks. And I see that happening across industries more and more, whether it's in, at law firms, whether it's in women home builders. And a part of this story really is about how these women, they started out as the only, but now they're at this place where they've created, as Sonja has said, these really powerful women's networks. And men are an important, very important part of that network as well. But I think there's power for disruption when women get together.
Sonja.
I think it's in politics. Our government is basically white male, and even though we had more women in Congress than ever, it's still a very small number compared to our population. And so, I just would ask people to support women candidates, even the ones for the debate stage, even if you're not going to vote for them for president, but just to have more diverse voices heard in politics. And so many decisions are being made about our health, about our lives, by people who have no idea who we are.
Yes, question.
Cool. Hello. Testing. All right. So my name is LJ Irwin. I lead the West Coast program for Google Cloud for Startups. And I notice often that whether it's women or other underrepresented minorities, often it feels like whether you're in tech or in venture capital or in law, that you're like the only one. So when you were rising up the ranks, whether you're a reporter or as a venture capitalist, what strategies did you use to align yourself with other individuals your age or in your kind of cohort and to build those alliances so you didn't feel like you were always the only one rising up as opposed to being a part of a team? Can you tell us any type of strategies that you used to build that network?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I didn't really have any strategies, and in hindsight, I wish I had. I used to walk around and just talk about people are people, and there was no difference, and we all had the same minds, and the whole thing. And there was like a Young Venture Capital Association network where I met some people, but I really didn't. And actually in 2008 or 2010, which is where I really, needed some advice, I really didn't have anybody who understood what my situation was. I literally had no one I trusted that I could ask these questions to. And so the strategy I would have told my younger self is to network with people like starting like a Broadway Angels, younger, and that's been phenomenal, where people are your peers and they're like you. And you can have a voice, right? I mean, you really want the voice more than anything, and you want to be respected. So I would maybe even have a formal network that you put together, and maybe Google can sponsor it and have likes, because you really do need to have your trusted friend who really gets your job and really gets you, who you can ask like the really hard questions for. And I didn't have that when I needed it.
Do you feel like it's a challenge to identify those peers in like a zero-sum industry like venture capital?
No, because I started Broadway Angels and we have 52 members and everybody wants to be one, which is like shocking. And it's 10 years later and we're a force. Like everybody knows Broadway Angels. I've been told that we're the #1 angel group in the world, not just the women angel group, but angel group, because we are the top venture capitalists and top entrepreneurs, and we see everything. Sarah Flint and Argent and Hint Water. I mean, we're in all these great companies, and people love having us. So it's awesome. So I solved the problem, I guess. Yeah.
Anyone else? Oh, one in the back. Can you want to toss it?
That's so cool.
Hi, my name is Olivia. I also work with LJ. But I started a women's book club, and we read your book just last month with Jennifer, and it was phenomenal. I really love that there's just different chapters that you guys go through in your life. And I think there is a quote where it's, you're on a boat, and it's so easy to kind of look at the day-to-day and kind of feel a little seasick, and that you have to look at the horizon and just kind of go towards that. So my question to you is, looking back at what you've done, like what would you tell your 20-something-year-old self? Like, I mean, I think a lot of us are focusing on careers, maybe like growing a family and things like that, but there's going to be different chapters in your life that will change. But what's that horizon? What's that one thing that you always have to keep looking for, reminding yourself to be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to do with like your passion for what the work is. And so I was always so passionate about investing in entrepreneurs and changing the world through investments. And so that was just, it was so easy for me. Nothing else really mattered, to be perfectly honest. Like the book is very wonderful in the stories, but like all the little slights, like really it's like water off a duck's back. Like, it was like winning. It was investing in these companies. It was changing the world, investing in Andy Ory 3 times, right? I mean, that's what it was about. And so I would just say, focus on your passion and finding out what it is that you get excited about. And you can still do those other things, maybe in different ratios. Now when you're all young, work your hardest, like have no balance, because you're going to need balance later. And so you're going to need to have your reserves built up, which is what I did. I worked nonstop until I was like 42. So literally nonstop.
And I would just add to that a story in the book about MJ Elmore, the one who drove the Pinto west and starts at Intel. So she, as we do in our lives, she starts adding on with a husband and with 3 children. And she's working, her husband works full-time at a venture firm in the Valley, and she's full-time. And she makes the mistake of being really the one at home who does the lion's share of the work. She's the go-to parent for the kids, and she's taking care of aging parents. And when the marriage starts to falter, she's the one who decides to step back, and no one says, well, why doesn't your partner do that? Or the question never comes up. So today, MJ says, I mean, keep your foot in the door, but she doesn't blame her now ex-husband, who's a great guy. She doesn't blame him. She almost blames herself, because she says that her overachieving, doing everything, thinking she could, it was easier to do it herself than to ask for help. Her overachieving, in a way, enabled his underachievement at home. So ask for help, set the responsibilities. Who's going to do what? When you find a partner, talk about these things. Talk about, when you have kids, what's going to happen? When there's networking at night, and you want to do this, make sure that it's going to be equitable, because that is one of the biggest things that continues to derail women. So there are really important lessons that I hadn't thought of in the way that are told through these stories.
Is there anything that you wish you had done differently?
No. I mean, not one thing. I wouldn't change one experience in my life, even the bad ones, or ones that would be perceived as bad, because I think that what happens to you in your lifetime kind of creates who you are, right? And I look at myself now and I love myself, so I wouldn't change a thing, because sometimes hardship makes you stronger. It gives you wisdom and insight. And so, when you have the hard things that happen, you just look at it like, how can I turn this into my friend? Like, how can this be a career building instead of career limiting?
Obstacles
our allies.
It's so fun, because you see Sonja's personality, which is completely authentic, and then each woman in the book, they have very different personalities. So it's fun for me to now listen to Sonja, and I know how authentic she is and how much she really believes in this. Obstacles are my allies. That's how she looks at life. And
the easy way or the hard way, right? Why don't you live your life the easy way? And it's all in your head. Everything that happens to you is really processed through your own head. And if you can just get out of your own head and say, okay, well, this isn't so bad, or look at all these great things, it's like magical. Like, we choose our own happiness. It's amazing. And once you realize you have that power, that you choose your own happiness, guess what? You can choose to be happy.
Sound like you live in California.
No, I mean, anywhere. It's so simple.
You'd never know you're from Virginia. I mean, sorry, Pittsburgh, and by the way, UVA. Yep. Another question. You going to toss it over that way? Yep. Oh. Not known for our athletic skills.
All right, I've got it. So Sonja, I'm wondering, you mentioned that when you first broke into VC, you were 29.
No, I was 22.
Oh, 22. Okay, 22, and you didn't fit the criteria for a venture capitalist. So how did you win over your partners? Like, how did you get them to take a chance on you?
Yeah, so when I first started in TA, a professor of mine, Neil Snyder, actually introduced me to one of the partners at TA Associates, and they ask, who's your best student or your favorite student, and I was luckily that person. And so I worked really hard in college, and people noticed. But also, I graduated from college in 1988. And so in the late 80s, the PC was just coming to become a business tool, and nobody had a computer in college. You hand-typed your papers and things. So I was really interested in PCs and networking. And so I worked in the computer lab. I was a programmer at the Department of Neurosurgery at UVA. And I did all these jobs because my parents didn't give me any money for clothes. And if you were a computer programmer, you got paid $8 versus $4 at the gym. And so I'm very grateful that they did not give me the money, because all of a sudden I had these skills. And so TA had just figured out the software industry, which the venture industry really didn't value for a long time, because your engineers go home at night, and they thought that was the value, versus it was a wonderful business model where you could make something once and sell it over and over. And so they had invested in mainframe and mid-range, but they didn't have any partners that understood PC software. And even though I didn't really understand it as people today understand it, but I knew more than anyone else. And so I brought something very unique to the table. And then while I was at TA, I invested in 3 companies, and all 3 of them went public, including McAfee Associates. So when I got to Menlo Ventures, I had a really great track record, and they didn't have any expertise in security. And I had done a lot of security investing at the time, even though I was young, and also had worked for Symantec while I was at business school, the same clothing problem I had in business school. And so that was basically it. So I think in order to get on a venture capital firm, you need to bring something unique to the table. And I think with AI, machine learning, a Bitcoin and blockchain, like a lot of VCs don't have strong expertise in that. So, maybe get in a group that is a new technology that may be taking off.
I think Sonja's being a little modest too, because her story of McAfee, when you read it in the book, is pretty compelling. She cold called and just nailed it eventually, but it's pretty impressive, and it kind of lends to a couple of the things that Julian speaks of through an assistant, I believe, of Teresa's describing her. But you talk about, it is the alpha woman to me, because you talk about, you say here, she's not afraid to take risks in an industry that isn't female friendly. She shares the spotlight and empowers other women. She's philanthropic and cares about issues, but she really is a risk taker. And I think that's, not afraid to fail.
Wired rewrote it, or took the book, the McAfee story. You should just Google the Wired article. It's hilarious.
Oh, now I've got to go read that now.
Yeah.
Another question, yes.
Hey, so I resist the term girls when applied to me or other adult women. Can you comment a little bit on the title and whether that's, why not alpha women?
I feel like there is great power in girls, and girls are brave, and girls are happy, and girls are joyous, and girls are smart. And I like the juxtaposition of that word with the word alpha. And I think that however old we are, we can all be girls. Oh, let's get together with the girlfriends. I think it should be a badge of honor.
You don't think it's infantilizing to some extent? I think this is something I've been struggling internally with a lot, because I'm wearing a pink frilly skirt as I ask this question, right? But looking at my 3-year-old daughter, I think what this translates to is this desire for cuteness, and that we as women have to always strive for a certain cuteness, even as a woman in tech, right? So I struggle.
Well, I think this is just the opposite of cuteness. I think this is brain power, it's tenacity, and it is using, hard work and, again, brain power to make your dreams a reality. So if that's cute, then that's cute. But I think it's about strength, and I think it's about tenacity, and I think it's about bravery, and I think it's about trailblazing, and I think it's about being one of these everyday radicals, these tempered radicals who get to a point where they can trailblaze. So I love the title. I've heard this question before, and it's fine. Titles are tricky. The title also attracted Kathy Schulman, who is the Academy Award-winning producer who's adapting it for television. She saw it on her desk, it was a proposal at that stage, and she was like, oh, there's something about this title that grabs you, that pulls you in, that makes you curious about it. And then the subtitles have gotten very long. The women upstarts who took on Silicon Valley's male culture and made the deals of a lifetime. So we do have women in the subtitle.
I think, too, when you read the book, you'll hear these 4 women, and I think of Magdalena in particular. You learn that they have these alpha girl traits as you've learned them in childhood. The mothers gave them a lot of, or helped cultivate. So it's not like they hit their professional womanhood and said, now I'm an alpha.
That's a really interesting point. Because I do tell the stories of these women when they were children, and these kind of pivotal moments, where actually the fathers had really, really key roles, which is another great lesson to be a male ally. To all the dads out there, this is pretty profound. It was for Sonja. It remains so for Sonja. And actually for all of the women who were very inspired as girls by their fathers.
Other questions? Oh, yes. Behind you.
This is a question for Sonja. First of all, thanks for sharing your experiences. This has been a very rewarding talk. I'm fascinated with your ability to read markets. How did you learn to do that? And also, when did you know you were successful? When was the first moment that you knew that you were successful?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know. I think I always believed in myself, and so I probably didn't even think about what success was. It was more about just doing what I was passionate about. But reading markets is actually much easier than you think. Maybe it's a woman thing. What you have to do is ask people what are their problems that they need to have solved, right? And that's why you don't have to understand technology to actually be a great venture capitalist, because like I can't tell you how a semiconductor is made, right? But I know that processing power is important, right? And so, one example was this company called F5, right? And F5 was the leading load balancing company when the internet was getting started. And the big problem was that there were these latency issues, and traffic wasn't well managed between servers when people kept growing their websites. And so I just asked companies what were their issues, and they said latency is a problem. I'm like, I wonder what companies are solving that. And Cisco is solving it in a very poor fashion. And then this little company called F5, which, Jeff Husey, who's the founder of that company, he was out fundraising, and he wasn't a typical CEO. He was actually a Wall Street banker before that, and super smart, but maybe not as polished as other CEOs might look when they're fundraising. And he didn't have any offers, which was kind of surprising. I mean, he had an investment bank that was willing to put some money in, but he didn't have any real Silicon Valley term sheets. And it was just so obvious to me. And so, of course, I did the deal with my friend Kim King, who is African American and a venture capitalist, which is very, very rare. She's the real unicorn. And we did the deal. And then we had 2 women on the board out of a board of 5. And nobody even thought to take a picture. Isn't that funny? We didn't even think that way. It's really funny. But anyway, the company went public. It still is public. It still is the leading company in the space.
Other questions? Well, I'll ask one. We were talking a little bit about this earlier, and this is for both of you. We've talked about you need to see it in order to be it, and if you see women in leadership, then you realize what is possible. However, with younger generations, we're looking at how they are influenced now, and it's not necessarily by an older generation. They are looking sideways to each other. As Sonja mentioned, they might be looking at themselves. I mean, social media has such an impression now. How do we continue to inspire them and mentor them if they're not even looking to us? Maybe they're looking, younger than themselves or in their circle of friends.
Well, I think, the book is one thing, but I think reaching a broader audience, which is why I'm super excited about the television series and the adaptation, just to reach a very broad commercial audience that I may not reach, although I would like to with the book alone.
Talks at Google will help.
Yes, exactly. So, tell everyone about the book and read the book now. So I think getting it out into the mass media, and just again, I am a storyteller. I am a believer in the power of stories to change lives. And I believe that with my heart and soul, and I can prove that actually with many, many instances, things that I've written about, where it is profoundly impactful. And so again, going back to tell your stories, men and women, and raise the stories of women up, and make the success stories of women more prevalent. So that's what I would say to that question. Exposure.
Sonja, anything to add?
Yeah, well, if I have the answer, it might help my daughter too. I think Julian's right. It's just getting the stories out. But for me, what I try to do to influence younger people is I'm the founder of Project Glimmer, and our mission is to inspire at-risk teenage girls and women to believe in themselves by letting them know their community cares. And we give them jewelry and makeup. We do a program for foster girls where first thing they do is they get their hair and their makeup done, and we take a beautiful photograph because that's interesting to them, right? And then later we have the messages about, networking and believing in yourselves and all that because, society is telling women and girls, you've got to look beautiful at all times, but then we all know in our hearts, no, it's really what's on the inside. But these young women are getting so many mixed messages. So we're like, sure, we want you to look beautiful so you'll feel great about yourself, and then we'll tell you why the inside is so important. And so that's my trick, and I think it's working.
And it also for boys, with the 12-year-old son, we have the
Yeah.
same problem with, so I think it is a generational thing for these young people. I do want to, I've got two more questions. One of them is, if someone, even those of us in our mid-career, like myself, had a great idea, how would we get it to Broadway Angels?
You have to know somebody. You do, and so it's funny. So one, because you would imagine how many proposals we would get if we just got things cold. So one of the criteria is, in order to show a deal as a member of Broadway Angels, you have to be an investor in the deal yourself already and seriously considering the deal. And so all the time wasting, things just don't show up to Broadway Angels. And so it's all about networks. Like, it's pretty easy to know one of us. I mean, there's 52 of us, right? So, and just reach out and then convince one or two of us to invest or seriously consider investing, and that's how you get in.
And I believe there is information. Well, I know Broadway Angels on your website, you have information to contact you and send you information. And of course, Julian's got her contact information in the author's note at the end of the book as well. So for stories there that are compelling. The final question I'd love to ask both of you is, who, as a woman, of influence today, should we be looking to for inspiration, encouraging others to look to?
I think it's more accessible. Again, I think we should not be looking to someone, that we don't know. I think we should be applauding those who are in our midst. Our moms, our grandparents, our sisters, our female colleagues, the women who I write about, I think, as I said, are extraordinary real-life role models. But really look for those in your life, in your own career, who have made a difference. So that's where I find it, again, going back to being accessible, being real, lifting other women up, and finding inspiration with those who are right around you.
I agree. I think the media and movie stars and pop culture, they get way too much influence for what they bring to society. So just people that that are doing cool things. I agree with Julian.
And there are a lot of them there. Thank you so much, Julian Guthrie, Sonja Perkins, for being with us today. Please check out Alpha Girls, and we look forward to having another talk at Google soon.